Welcome to MMA Podcast. My name is Luke Payson, and it's always an honor to have a first-time guest of the show. In this case, even more of an honor because first-time guest of the show is also the reigning, newly crowned bantamweight 247 fighting amateur champion of the world, Jacob Wiggins. Jake, welcome to the show.
How's it going?
It's going very well. Always excited to be able to talk to somebody for the first time on the show, and even more exciting for the fact that we're 2.5 days removed from you winning in dramatic, fantastic first-round knockout TKO fashion at Brawl in the Burgh 17 for 247 fighting championships. But before we jump into that, because that is pretty exciting, before we jump into that, let's back up. You came into this fight with 5 amateur fights under your belt, and then obviously had an incredible win. What got you interested in MMA to begin with? What got you training MMA? Let's kind of back up towards the beginning.
Well, to start, to be honest, I don't know. It's not a crazy story, but I like to fight as a kid and wanted to box. So I did it with friends until my mom finally convinced her to let me, and I started in boxing. Did that for a little while, and it was a real small gym. Once that things turned on that, or that kind of went away. My buddy's dad was an MMA coach, so I started doing MMA and just never stopped. Fell in love with it. So,
and take us back to your first. You've won 3 of your 4 wins by strikes, which is exciting. Of course, you're a very strike heavy fighter. What was getting your win, your debut win back in 2018? You took on another debuting fighter and you won in round 1 in under 2 minutes with punches. What do you remember from that fight, and how did that feel to get kind of the picture perfect start to your MMA career?
yeah, I was training MMA for a little while and jumped into the cage as soon as I turned 18, right before I left for the Army, actually. And it was a peer stand-up fight. All the nerves were there, not so much experience, and we just stood in front of each other and threw hands, and I had the stronger hands that day.
Gotcha. So good outcome, but when you look back at it, obviously not technical. You were 18,
No, not at all.
growing down. Yeah. Hey, it got it started off. It was interesting. You mentioned joining the Army. It was an interesting dynamic because you're an Army veteran, and Miguel Francisco, who was fighting for the belt, the challenger, he's in the Army National Guard. So it was kind of a cool, very patriotic, very pro-USA title fight. So it was kind of fun to point that out on the broadcast. When did you start training at Temple MMA with Calvin Hero Harbaugh, and what has that been like for you?
I'm probably gonna screw this date up, but
Okay.
I got out of the Army October 21st, or October of 2021, and probably, I want to say couple months went by, and I started training with him. I had trained with him previously a few times when I had came home just for leave from the Army. Just did some private sessions with him. And then once I was back home for good, I basically took some time off and then started training with him full time.
That makes sense. I can also see on your Tapology, you ended up having 2 fights, one in 2018 that we talked about, one in 2019, and then obviously your military gap back out in 21. And it looks like you took a fight probably shortly after training with your coach, and then you've been with him ever since. That's fantastic. What's that gym like? He has fought for a title for 247. That's kind of how all this came together. The last event, he headlined against Ethan the Wolverine Goss, and obviously that created a connection. Then his wife, who I'm sure you know pretty well, she competed on the first ever Sprawl in the Burgh, and then you. So obviously, kind of developing that connection with 247, which is pretty fantastic. So what's it been like training with him?
It's awesome. I've been we've been blessed to become training partners, and he's obviously my main coach. We same weight class. He's got some more experience than me for sure, but we mix our styles together very well, and it's good, very good for us.
That makes a lot of sense. It's rare in the sense that you'll be an amateur at the same weight class as your pro coach who's currently active. I just looked on his topology. You know this, but I wasn't aware that in just a couple months after his fight for 247, he got back in the win column with a submission rear naked choke win, which he actually defeated Chaka Worthy. That's how he first got connected to 247, taking on a local guy, Chaka Worthy, who's the younger brother of UFC veteran, common with Death Star Worthy. So very exciting. But what's it been like? That's a pretty busy gym. You know, he had a fight, a big time fight. Then you had a fight coming up, but then he had another big fight. Like, is that a very close relationship training where you're helping him and obviously doing a lot of what he needs for his fights and vice versa? I would assume being a smaller gym, that you guys are pretty in sync when you have fights.
Yeah, it's the last couple months have been very busy to say the least, but very good because it's all fight focused. We
Yeah.
diet's on point, training's on point, our styles mix very well together, and when we're in the gym together, it's all business.
Yeah, that's exciting. That makes a lot of sense. How would you describe your style now? I mean, obviously the striking is what's been winning, but you did show some nice scrambles and sort of wrestling defense and got back up to the feet after Miguel, who's known to be a ground game guy, took you down. So you looked really good, even in the situations where you were on the defense. And then we'll talk about the tide turning. But
Yeah, for sure. It definitely frustrated me because it kind of happened in my last fight too, before Miguel when I fought AJ Pratt. He was a wrestler, and I still got taken down a couple times, which is a little disappointing, but I train with some pretty high level wrestlers, and obviously Kelvin. So being on the
yes.
ground doesn't give me any worries. I'm not worried about it all. I just get back up and then I let my hands work.
Yeah, and I mean, you almost duplicated. You mentioned AJ Pratt, and he was a super experienced amateur, you know, coming into your fight with 9 fights before you fought him. So that's a guy with a lot of experience. You won at round one, 2 minutes and 50 seconds in, and Saturday night you won at 2:22 minutes in of round one. And sounds like they were relatively similar, since that you got taken down, but you worked out of it and then ended up winning with strikes. From what I remember, you did tag Miguel in the championship fight kind of early, and then the grappling exchange, and you got back up to your feet, and then from there you finished it. What do you remember as the finishing sequence? And Miguel was coming in on a 3-fight win streak, and a lot of people are still very excited about him. He said on Facebook he's bumping back up to 45. Didn't like the cut to 35. That's not taking anything
Yeah.
away from you, because you landed a lot of damaging blows. What was when did you kind of know it was headed in your direction?
Well, I told some of the guys, and it was kind of game plan, not game plan, but I knew, like, because some of my fights I've started off slow, and that's got me into trouble before. So I knew with Miguel that as soon as we touched gloves, we were both going to be throwing hands. So I was throwing that straight two right down the middle. We worked a lot of that sprint step and covering distance with that, so I could catch him right away on the chin, and it worked.
Yeah.
That's not what put him away, but I definitely touched him.
Yeah, so you're referencing the time you kind of hit him hard sort of earlier in the round, and because I remember his head. You landed a couple good ones. From what I remember, I know how he ended up because it's kind of a bad spot for him to be in. He was on the ground. Something was happening. You were back to your feet. He kind of dove for, couldn't even call it a single leg. He was just wrapped around your ankle, and you were able to, while standing, kind of pound him out while he was holding onto your ankle, which really, slammed his head all around the place. He wasn't really able to defend himself, hence the stoppage. Plus, it appeared that he was fully out once you landed a couple. But what set that up? I got to rewatch it. We had a very busy weekend with back-to-back nights, so I have to rewatch it. But what do you remember as setting it up that led him to kind of take that desperation shot, which makes sense? He's a wrestler. He saw, hey, I'll just hold on. But what do you remember as setting that up before he got a hold of your ankle and then you finished him from there?
Well, I think my performance was definitely not the best, but it was very good. It can always be better, but I knew he was boxer heavy, so I really wanted to blow out his front leg, and I did that, set that up perfectly. I think once I did that, he didn't want to stand too much after that, and I think he definitely emptied his gas tank, picking me up and putting me down the however many times he did. And then I knew once I got back to my feet, then it was pretty much over at that point. I was going to let my hands go and not let him grab my feet again.
Yeah, there's definitely, now that you mentioned it, 2 fights in a row, you had finishes in the first round, but were able to kind of manage the wrestling, because in the moment it's got to be frustrating to be taken down. But as long as you end up managing it, and obviously maybe one day you'll be able to stuff the takedown. But a lot of wrestling heavy attackers, they're gonna land a takedown. I remember when DC took John Jones down, and that was like a big deal, right? But because John Jones wasn't taken down much in his career, wrestlers are gonna land takedowns. But what's important is kind of what they do with it, or in your case, what they don't do with it. So very exciting. Now, the finishing sequence for Miguel, that's got to be one of the more dominant finishes, I would assume. I know you've had now 3 striking finishes, but was that the most dominant, where your opponent was kind of like either fully out or almost fully out? I mean, he was in a bad way when Chip Snyder, which is understandable. I mean, you were landing it, but is that kind of the highlight reel knockout? Or I haven't seen your other knockouts, or are they all kind of that violent?
Yeah, I mean they're all kind of like that. That was
Okay.
nothing special to me. That's my job
Gotcha.
in there, is to win, to kill or be killed, and I let my hands do the work. So
Sure, makes a lot of sense. I know you had said that in the build up. You truly are a warrior. We talked about your being in the army, and so yeah, it sounds like you got a great mindset for weathering what happens in a cage fight. Obviously, coming out with the title win is pretty incredible. What has that meant to you? I know some fighters completely okay. Some fighters think amateur belts, aren't really exciting. Some fighters, it's a big deal because you're fighting a better guy. You get a recognition. It's something that you can keep and kind of display. So where are you on the championship status?
yeah, I mean it feels awesome. Obviously,
Sure.
I was really excited to eat some pizza. I put in a lot of work. It was definitely a big deal, but it's I want to go pro, so it's an awesome thing. I'm excited. It feels good, but take a little tiny bit of time off and get right back to it and get ready for the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes sense, right? It's something, once you're pro, amateur record resets. So it's not like this
Yeah.
win necessarily. But what's cool about it is even guys at the highest level remember an amateur belt win, because it's a big deal at the time it happens. You got to appreciate your first win. You got to appreciate a loss where you learn from it, right? There, every element
Yeah.
of your career is going to have meaning for you. You mentioned the fact that your goal is to go pro. Obviously, now that you've increased to 4-2, is the mindset give yourself a couple more years? Is the mindset a couple more fights? Is the mindset you and coach obviously makes that decision? Do you want to go on a streak? You know, I've seen some guys turn pro after an amateur loss because they felt like they were ready regardless. Or is it all about development? Because clearly having the goal of pro doesn't mean you have a game plan right now.
Yeah, no, I definitely have a goal and a game plan.
Oh,
I don't want to fight. I don't want to have a ton of amateur fights, but I don't have a few either. I definitely want to take one more tough,
gotcha.
good fight that, gives me another test and put that guy away, and then I think that'll be the right time.
That makes a lot of sense. And obviously, I'm not going to put you on the spot to think about what's next for you because you're just 2 days removed from a title fight. So obviously, this is super exciting. What aspect or moment of winning the belt Saturday did you appreciate the most? Even if it was before the fight, after the fight, during the fight, the people that were there to see you, your corner, like what part of it will you take away from the most as we kind of celebrate what was a great victory for you?
Honestly, like it was another really fun experience being in enemy territory and for a for a title fight, so there was definitely, it felt like there was a lot more on the line. It didn't stress me out more, but it just, everything about it felt more important. So I knew I had to be on point in the cage, and just being in that moment was the best part for me.
Yeah, that's certainly the mental side of the game. You and your team are from Michigan, so coming into Pittsburgh is very much on the road. I think that experience will help you when you're pro or when you take another tough fight, because sometimes your better fights are going to be when you are on the road. I always think of Ohio native Stipe Miocic. He won his title fight down in Brazil when they were literally chanting in Portuguese, die, 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 right? So,
Yeah.
and then he said he liked that better than fighting in his hometown of Cleveland because there was more pressure of family and friends when you're the hometown guy than when he was down in another country. So
Yeah.
it is part of the game to be able to travel, take the show on the road, and have a dominant win no matter where you are, because obviously that's a big part of it being a sport. So I think that is really great that that's your mindset, that it's a 247 had a lot of people there. They set it up in a very big professional way, a pay-per-view, the online stream. It'll be replayed on Pittsburgh television. I don't think they've announced a date yet, but it'll be in people's homes on TV. I mean, it's got a lot of excitement behind it. 247 puts on a great event. What were your thoughts? You've fought at a couple different promotions. What were your thoughts on both events? Because obviously you were there the night before as well. What were your
Yeah.
thoughts on Sprawl in the Burgh and Brawl in the Burgh?
I was pretty impressed. I was there for when Calvin fought Goss for the main event
Of course.
at the casino. So that was the only prior experience of you guys that I had. I thought this was awesome. I thought it was good. I liked the venue more. It's a lot bigger. Sound, the crowd was good. I thought everything was put together. We were taken care of very well. There was not a lot of confusion, not too much waiting around. So yeah, I thought everything was very solid.
That is cool. Yeah, I mean, I know 247, myself included, loves going to the Meadows because of the environment being right to a casino. Fights in a casino goes
Yeah.
together. You're right though, that venue is more of a compact environment. There's a lot of standing room only at that venue. It set the record for the number of tickets sold for the venue we're talking about, and it was super, super exciting. But I agree with you. I've called a lot of fights at Monroeville, and I think Monroeville has room for a bigger crowd, right? Because it's a convention center. It's got a lot
Hmm.
more space. and Burgh and your Burgh 17 is really starting to show that 247 is getting to the point where Monroe Convention Center doesn't seem huge anymore. You know, first couple fights there, we definitely grown into it. Now it's like, yeah, we need this space. So pretty cool to see that. Just as kind of a wrap up, because it's been fun talking to you about the fight itself. I noticed a tattoo on you and asked you about it in the cage because Caesar, Julius Caesar, when he came back from, I believe it was the Gallic Wars. I forget which war it was, but he came back victoriously. And a lot of people know the phrase, I came, I saw, I conquer, but they don't know it comes from Latin, vidi, vini, vici. What got you into Caesar's sort of champion, mindset, and how long ago did you get the tattoo? It's very much a warrior tattoo for sure. I was just curious about it.
Yeah, I've always it's just been my mindset. It was actually my second tattoo.
Your second, okay.
Yeah, so I got that when I was like, I don't know, 17, I think.
Okay.
So it's always been my mindset. I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than gardener in a war, that type of thing.
Sure. I mean, you've got a lot of great tattoos now, but it's a warrior tattoo, but it's pretty sophisticated warrior tattoo to know Latin and the connection. And you even did kind of the I assume those are laurels, right, around it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my assumption, because the expression, which you don't do, but the expression resting on your laurels, a bush or a plant that they would cut and make a crown out of for victors in Roman culture, and also connected to the Greeks when they used to have those laurels from the Olympics. That's what you would get. Instead of a gold medal, you'd get a sort of a wreath around your head, hence the expression resting on your laurels. Super exciting. All your tattoos are great, but a connection to kind of a warrior culture. It's just really cool. I saw it on your chest. I was like, I've got to make a comment of it in cage because it was just fun. And I have to, he's now passed away, but I have to thank Dr. Pavic for, in college, I was a history major for a couple of years, for having us memorize that phrase, because he thought it was so cool. And it was actually a bit of a billboard. Julius Caesar did a marketing campaign just like we do today, and he paid people to go and write it on buildings all over the city. So that would have been like billboard, BC billboards. Pretty cool connection. But anyhow, you've been very kind with your time. Congratulations to not only you, but everybody at Temple MMA. It's kind of fun to see a gym really starting to take root all the way from Michigan in the Pittsburgh area. I wish you best skills in the future, and hopefully I'll be able to have you on in the future, wherever your next fight takes you, to be able to kind of follow you as you head up the rankings to go pro at some point. So thanks so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks for listening to Luke Payson with MMA Fancast with the new Bantamweight 247 Fighting Championship Amateur Champion, Jake Wiggins. Thanks so much, buddy.
Thank you.
You got it.